Welcome to Motorcycle.com's 2017 KTM 1290 Adventure R review in Paracas, Peru. Oh, wait, wrong KTM. And there's a Honda here with me. This must be the CRF1000L Africa Twin versus KTM's new 1090 Adventure R shootout. Here we are heading into the desert. I should turn to gravel here in a second. Oh, see it up there. Get a good crash on film here. So, yeah, it is gravel. What do you know? But these are adventure bikes, and gravel ain't no problem. So this is my first motorcycle ride since I busted my leg up on the 1290 Super Adventure R intro last month in Peru. And so far I'm doing alright. I have some special bandaging on. I do have a very large hole in my leg now. Get cocky about the whole adventure bike thing and then lose the front on video would be awesome. 2 crash videos in 2 months. Anyway, here we are. Join us for this shootout. It should be a lot of fun. We're going to Vegas the hard way. Scott and I are following this ridge line out into the desert. Good fun on this 2-track. The only problem is it's just full of softball sized rocks. Spodes like me, we hate the softball sized rocks. Sure feels plush. It's got a lot of spring. Of course, I added a lot of preload to it. Kind of a nice ride, actually, to tell you the truth. I like the way it's handling these little G-outs and whoops. Africa Twin seems to be a little more boringy over there to my left. Woohoo! You gotta love those 20-foot long front end slides. You know, going a little faster here and you get a little more stability. Like has the velocity has a lot of drawbacks in the rough stuff. One positive is it has the effect of acting almost like you watered down the sand because you hit the sand a lot harder, just a lot more compacted under your tires at speed, or it planes on top of it like the boat does on water. So when it's deep and wishy-washy, a little bit of speed is actually your best friend. The other one will be keeping your weight back, keeping a little bit of throttle on, even when you're stopping, so that you don't plow the front so much. These are fun bikes for some mild to moderate off-road use. You wouldn't want to be riding no Supercross on them. Sort of an iconic waypoint between LA and Vegas. And hidden inside, well, not necessarily hidden, it's kind of loud and shouty and tacky looking, but here in Vaker there is one place called Mad Greek. Mad Greek happens to have maybe the world's best strawberry shake. It's something a little bit salty about it. It's, you know, it's like got really good flavor to it. So you gotta stop at the Mad Greek and get a strawberry shake anytime you pass by Vaker. And handy giant thermometer will tell you what the temperature outside is. Anyway, I think it's going to be a gyro pita and strawberry shake, maybe some zucchini sticks or something like that. There will be fellowship and laughter and full bellies and big smiles in the middle of this freaking hellhole. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen, the world famous Mad Greek as seen on Motorcycle.com. Subtle, isn't it? Welcome to Prim, Nevada. Heading across the dry lake bed. go very fast. There he goes. Have to downshift to keep up with him. Las Vegas. It's been a long day in the saddle with the KTM 1090 Adventure R and the Honda Africa Twin. Having a good time so far. Definitely some differences between the bikes, but overall they're extremely competitive with each other. So here's a shot of the golden south end of the strip. All that glitters is not gold. That is not a political commentary, although it could be. Anyway, we are heading into town for a Springfield Armory Firearm new press launch, sort of like a motorcycle new model intro, except it's for a new model of Springfield Armory Firearm. It's a mystery gun. We don't know what it is. Probably won't find out until tomorrow at the range. But they are announcing a new model, and it's not really a Mo thing, so you don't have to worry about it too much. But Scott and I are excited because we really like Springfield, and we really like motorcycles, and we don't mind mixing a little Springfield Armory in with Motorcycle.com from time to time. Oh, it's time to go to our hotel, Paris, Las Vegas. Oh.
We're here for a Springfield Armory shoot that'll be tomorrow with some kind of new mystery gun they're introducing. But it was a great excuse to take two bikes and do a hybrid highway/desert ride out to Vegas. We didn't just come straight up the freeway.
So here we are, pulling into the Clark County shooting complex. Probably not supposed to go off-road here, but I mean, heck, we are conducting an ADV shootout.
Visit Motorcycle.com.
Shut up!
What'd you bring me to ride this time?
KTM 1090 and
Really?
Honda 1000, yeah. Come on, Rob, let's go, man.
The Paris thing,
Yeah,
they do
the
sport
Africa Twin.
You
Yeah.
got one?
Yeah, come on. Now it's got. Let me take the traction control down a little bit. It always.
I'm just gonna punch it around. I won't do anything.
Okay.
I just want to see what it's like. I've ridden a couple GS's, but I've never ridden one of these. So.
It's a great bike. Nice low center of gravity. It's really nice bike at like low speed maneuvering and stuff.
Really?
That's Rob Leatham. He's their champion shooter. He and I are two separated at birth. So we get together, we're just like blah blah blah, just inappropriate joke, my dick's bigger than yours, you know, that all that shit.
Yeah.
We go out shooting, I'm like, dude, you don't know what you're doing.
I could tell he had a sense of humor. So I was like, yeah, turn shot down my drone. I've seen someone wheeling. He's like, yeah, that's how we get equipment out here.
He's like he's one of the best shooters in the world. But he's awesome. He's got the greatest sense of humor, and he's just like a big kid, you know. Big kid who could kill you in about half of a blink of an eye, but he's a super nice guy. This is Springfield's Rob Latham, folks.
Riding around the parking lot on all the things I wish I could have, but thank goodness our friends at Motorcycle.com brought it for us. Thanks.
So these two bikes, they're really well matched. We think KTM probably targeted the Africa Twin with the new 1090 Adventure. So it was natural just to get them together. We just had the press intro like a week and a half ago. Tom Ruderick was there. And KTM was really quick with the turnaround on the press bikes, and we happen to still have an Africa Twin from Scott's recent Taste of Dakar story. So we threw them together and we pulled a shootout. Springfield had this event. It seemed like a good excuse and a good destination for a shootout ride. So here we are in Vegas. We've spent a whole day on the bikes at this point, and so far, what do you think?
I think exactly what you just said. They're really closely matched motorcycles. I think that the difference between the two really bears itself out in the dirt a little bit more, I think, than on the road.
In stock trim, right?
In stock trim. The KTM, I would say, is just a bit more dirt worthy, a little bit more dirt oriented in the way that its chassis and its suspension feels. But at the same time, I feel like the Honda kind of has a slight edge in engine response. It doesn't make as much power as the KTM, obviously. It's a parallel twin, and still has a 270-degree crank in it, so it feels like a V-twin.
Sounds like a V-twin.
Sounds like a V-twin. But you know, it's responsive. I think that the KTM's ride-by-wire throttle might be just a little bit of a hindrance to the throttle response.
The Adventure R it's pretty soft on the bottom in off-road mode. I could criticize the 1290 for that last month when I compared it with my memories of the 1190. But this here 1090 seems to be the same thing, so it's got to be some electronic intervention. I'm just trying to make the bike easier to hook up.
They each do different things a little better than the other, but they're never super far apart. In fact, when you're off-road on the KTM, you're typically going to be in off-road mode, and in off-road mode it has almost exactly the same engine performance as the Honda does. Although it is softer off the bottom than the Honda. The Honda's actually perfectly controllable, but just a little bit more ready to go or to crawl around at low speed than the KTM is. And I totally agree with Scott that the Honda feels like it has a lower center of gravity, so it's just feels a little less tippy. That was really strongly my impression at first. After spending more time on the KTM and doing some low-speed parking lot type maneuvers and crawling around a little bit of a gravel pit on the KTM, I got used to it, and it stopped feeling so top-heavy to me. So I don't know if the center of gravity difference between the two is going to be something that's a deal breaker. I think if you're going to own one of the bikes, you're going to get very used to it very quickly. The KTM is by no means tippy or top-heavy feeling. It's just in comparison to a very particularly low center of gravity feeling bike like the Honda. We focus on this low-speed stuff a lot because in the real world, guys who buy these bikes to do everything with, you do a lot of parking lot maneuvering, a lot of tight U-turns and things like that, or right turns at a stop sign or a stoplight, right? It's a 90-degree right at a very low speed. And those are places where the Honda will feel noticeably lower center of gravity. The suspension, though, on the Honda is definitely, we took two stabs at adjusting it on the trail yesterday, added some preload and, you know, added a bunch of damping to it. We didn't want to lock the damping out by turning the adjuster all the way in, but in particular, rear rebound damping seems to be lacking on the Honda.
More like a pogo stick. Soft, whoa! Front end wanted to go there. Soft pogo stick though.
The spring rate's fairly low. It's got a very soft, compliant ride, but as you start to go a little faster through some whooped type terrain, I don't mean supercross whoops, but just trails with some rollers in it, the Honda will start a lot of fore-aft pitching motion, and it moves fairly quickly as it comes back up. So it doesn't bounce up, but it sinks in and then immediately rises back up. And the damping, that's where rebound damping would normally control the extension rate of the shock and slow down that return a little bit. And I think the Honda it needs a mountain more rebound damping.
You would have some money if you were going retail for retail. You would have some money to play with, to accessorize the Honda a little bit, to maybe get the suspension more dirt worthy like the KTMs.
We did spend some time on I-15 getting out of LA, and then the final section after we crossed into Nevada in the desert, we were back on I-15 into Vegas for another hour or whatever. And they're super comfortable. Just like the 1290 was down in Peru for an 8-hour day, these are bikes you can ride all day long and not be cramped.
Anyway, we're on the Africa Twin, 6th gear, 80 miles an hour. Looks like just under 5,000 RPM, maybe 4,800. Pretty smooth ride. There's a little bit of a buzz in the pegs. Seat's comfortable. Knees may be bent a little more than I'd like, but I've got long legs. Bike goes down the road real nice. For a dirt bike on TKC 80s, which are going to create a little bit of vibration on their own, it's perfectly rideable, cross country. It's perfectly suited to interstate cruising. I'd probably run a small windscreen, get my head in clean air if I was wearing an aerodynamic helmet. But maybe this windscreen's actually all right here at 80 miles an hour because the wind's not grabbing the visor of my helmet.
I really am impressed by that. I don't. You think of these as dirt bikes or super enduro bikes or something like that, but these are bikes. We live in Southern California. We could ride them 1,000 miles up to Seattle, no problem at all. Even if it was all pavement, these would make great sport touring bikes.
Anyway, back to the KTM's comfort. It feels just as smooth as a Honda. I think the power pulse is maybe just a little bigger. But the high frequency vibration, maybe there's a little less of it than on the Honda. Overall, there's more pulsing, but it's of a lower frequency, bigger amplitude nature, I would say, compared to some buzzing in the pegs on the Honda. So both of them perfectly happy to go straight down the road at, well, in this case, almost 90 miles an hour now, since I'm tucked in. No point in waiting around when you're crossing the freeway in the desert, right, folks? So, yeah, I think you can sit on this thing all day long. Wind noise gets pretty bad with an off-road helmet when you're sitting up. As you can see, I don't know if you can hear me, but needless to say, tucking you behind the screen is a great place for phone calls. Quick game of backgammon, whatever you need to do in relative quiet. That zone of relative quiet on the Honda is quite a bit bigger on the highway.
Yet they're, as we found out yesterday, they're fully capable of blasting through desert landscapes, getting a little air under the tires, or doing 130 across a salt flat one-handed while narrating in a camera, as happened yesterday.
We just rode into Prim and had a lot of fun. Now, I was in off-road mode here on the KTM 1090, chasing Scott on the Africa Twin, and I was WFO. I'm like, why is he able to stay with me here? Like, I can't actually reel him in. I can just match his speed. And I realized off-road mode cuts the power of the KTM. So, what would it do in sport mode here on the dry lake bed? Let's find out. Hit it, Scott. Now I'm going to let him pull away a little bit. Want to hit that? Bye, Scotty. Come on, 28, let's give it So sport mode on the dirt, 128's what you get.
Pretty neat, stable, fast bikes that are kind of working everywhere. Speaking of riding into Vegas on the 15 though, it did get up right around 90 degrees, you know, maybe 100 ambient around the asphalt on the freeway. And there was a fairly noticeable temperature difference between the Honda and the KTM. The Honda has a large windscreen on it, which you would think would be creating more of a heat effect behind it or less cooling effect. But it turns out the KTM actually had kind of a hot cockpit. The Honda, sitting down or standing up, you had about the same temperature, which was about like the KTM standing up. But if you were sitting down on the KTM, you were kind of in this little island of heat from the engine. I definitely would have preferred to be on the Honda in the hot stuff.
I think a lot of it has to do with the bodywork on the two motorcycles. If you look at what the Honda has going for it, it's more open through the the lower part of the fairing that's attached to the tank, and the KTM is more enclosed. One thing I did notice though about the KTM that I really like, and I just found out about this when I picked the bike up, is that it's kind of like a high impact plastic material that they're using that's more like a dirt bike material, which you think about it,
It's less brittle.
less brittle, less
Right.
likely to dent, you're not going to dent it, you're not going to take a big digger out of paint if you do tip the bike over. That's really something I wouldn't mind seeing some of the other manufacturers, go to with their adventure bikes. Another thing I noticed when riding these bikes is the difference in performance level between the brakes of the two bikes. The KTM uses Brembo brakes, which are pretty much standard fare on all KTM models across the board. And the Honda uses Nissan brakes. They both have twin rotors up front that are clamped by radial 4-piston calipers. And I believe that you can defeat the ABS on both of them in the back.
Yeah,
in the back only, though, for the Honda.
On the Honda, it's one mode of ABS, but you can turn off rear ABS intervention.
Right.
The KTM, you've got it's a Bosch 9 system. It has, you can basically configure it to do anything you want to. Linking, not linking, off-road specific ABS tuning, on-road specific ABS tuning, etc. But the KTM, of course, seems to feel a little bit more wooden at the lever.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Vague?
Yeah, very vague. KTM, Brembo brakes are typically known to be very high power, very strong. But it seems like getting there on the KTM, it's kind of hard to get a good feel for the modulation of the brake and where you need to be, especially in the dirt. Whereas the Nissans on the Honda are much more linear, much more fluid feeling. I always was able to dial in the right amount of brake, front or rear. Even with the ABS turned off in the rear, it wasn't like we were locking up the rear wheel all that much in soft and sandy stuff. So just a lot better controllable feel to me with the Honda brakes. The KTM, Sean nails it. It's just a wooden feeling at the lever, and it's just not something I ever really got used to, either on the street or off-road. So.
Right. Although I would say that the rear brakes on these bikes are both really good. Scott mentioned the Honda doesn't lock up, unintended in the dirt, but the KTM really isn't bad either. They're smart with the rear brake tuning. They've got them. They're not overly powerful. They're not overly bitey. So you can modulate with a big motocross boot, which is a little bit clumsy, right? In the front, though, either the pad compound or just something with the refinement in the the Africa Twin, something about that just feels better. It feels more natural. Everything about, I think we got that from the shootout last year. You probably got it Paris. Everything about the Africa Twin feels natural. When you ride it, the KTM's got some nicer fit and finish. The KTM's got an overall better motor in it, or more powerful motor, better suspension. That's why I say they're close on what's a better bike or what's the one to pick, but for different reasons. The Honda's refinement, the Honda's ease of riding, the feel of the brakes, the low center of gravity, the cool cockpit even in hot temperatures. The Africa Twin is pretty hard to beat as just a don't think about it, get on it and go ride motorcycle. The KTM, once you get the suspension set up on the Honda. In the KTM's case, you just got to figure out the settings you like, the level of ABS you like, etc. And then you have to get used to what the brake feels like, and you have to get used to what the bike feels like at low speed, and how the clutch engages, and how the engine responds right off the bottom. Whereas on the Honda, you never think about any of that stuff, right? I mean, it's pretty interesting. We're looking at a $1,400 less expensive bike that's 2 years older now at this point, and KTM kills it with travel adventure bikes and with motocross bikes. I mean, KTM, they can do no wrong. Like, KTM's been an amazing company in the last like 5 or 6 years. They've just really come alive. But in this instance, you have a bike that you would think stat-wise and stuff is the lower bike, but when you really look at it on balance, the Africa Twin, I would have a tough time if they were both the exact same price. I would have a very tough time choosing between them.
Yeah. I will say this though, and back me up on this. There's one area of the Honda, we talk about the typically great fit and finish that the Honda has, but there is one area that this
KTM's
bike
better.
just annoys me to no end. The bags. I cannot stand the Honda's bags. They flop around. They don't mount properly. You can't get them to get like a secure, snug feel in their mounting.
The latches
points.
look like a 1970s Samsonite suitcase latch. They're like bright chrome. Why do you have bright chrome on a dirt bike?
I don't know.
They're all separate from each other. There's no like single latch. There's no. It's just. In the case of the Honda, I would buy an Africa Twin in a heartbeat, particularly the new white with red and blue that looks with the gold rims and stuff. I'd buy that bike in a heartbeat, but I would not buy the optional bags. I'd go to Touratech or someone like that, actually have a proper rack put on it, and then proper off-road bags put on it. The KTM's bags are great. They're kind of modern looking. They don't look so rugged like an off-road bag.
Well, they are not.
But they're secure. They mount well, right?
The KTM's bags, though, those are not KTM's high-end bags like we saw when we rode in the wire wheel shootout with the aluminum and the framework and all that.
Right.
This is KTM's like mid-level bag, and it pretty much is constructed similarly to the Honda, but just the way that it latches onto the motorcycle, the way that it comes on and off the motorcycle, the way that the bags open up. One latch. It's an easy, you push that top button and it pops right open. The KTM the Honda, you have 2 latches. Sometimes you can't even close that bag when it's empty because either the little straps that hold the door open will get caught up in the, in the seal or the lip. Yeah. And so you're constantly fighting it. They're just, don't like them.
KTM is a super comfortable motorcycle. It's got a reasonably tall seat height. It's got great seat to peg room. So for tall guys like me, there's not a lot of bend in the knee. So my legs are extremely comfortable long distance on the KTM. Helping that, another thing in the KTM's favor for comfort is KTM offers an official KTM accessory off-road peg that gets rid of the rubber pad in the middle and actually makes a large bear trap style platform for you to stand on, and they're noticeably wider than the stock pegs. Don't have any rubber. They're metal teeth. They're the dedicated off-road ped that would work awesome in the mud, work awesome, in the sand, etc. But then you get on the freeway and you ride a long time. You want to stand up, get some fresh air. In case of the KTM, you want to get a little cooling. And unlike any other pegs I've used on a motorcycle, it feels like you're standing on the floor. There's no pressure point on your foot. You could stand on them all day long and it feels like your whole boot support, almost like a floorboard, but there's zero flex to them. Right. So it's not like your peg's doing this and your footing's uncertain. It's like the most rock solid, grabbing your boot, supporting the full bottom of your boot. It's just, they're the best pegs I've ever ridden on a motorcycle for distance. You wouldn't want them on a road race bike, but anywhere else, I mean, I would consider putting them on like a Tuono for a perfect street fighter, something like that.
Yeah, see, for me, ergonomically speaking, especially with regard to the KTM, Sean's like 6-foot giant, and I'm not. And I noticed that for me, the KTM is just a little bit tall. Sometimes I get a little bit, you know, I can really only put one foot down, and with considering the high center of gravity on the bike, or higher center of gravity than the Africa Twin, sometimes I get a little nervous, like, oh, am I going to be able to hold this thing up? Ergonomically, I think both bikes are pretty equal in terms of from the waist up, the way that the bars fall in your hands and things like that. But I did notice that the Honda is more of a sit-in feel. The KTM is more of a sit-on feel. The Honda's saddle is contoured in such a way where you really drop down in there, and I can see for a taller guy where that might be a problem. They do have an adjustable, it's a two-step seat. You can actually add, I believe, an inch to the Honda seat height.
I may complain a little bit about the seat to peg distance, but the Honda seat is not in its highest setting. I did ride it last year in its highest setting, and it was not a problem. So don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say here. The Honda is extraordinarily comfortable for long distance use, etc., etc., etc. But like I said, they're so closely matched overall. Like, we don't really have a solid winner here, not yet at least. We still got to ride back from Vegas through the desert and some more freeway and stuff like that. And we'll do a stand-up outside here to close off the video after we've done another 6 hours of riding or so.
Leaving Las Vegas. Leaving Las Vegas. That was a lot of fun. Saw a neat new gun. It's a secret though. We can't tell you anything about it until at least April 28th. But yeah. Vegas was dry, not too hot. Kind of fun. Kind of the same old thing over and over again, of course, because it's Vegas and it never changes.
So we've spent another good portion of the day riding back from Las Vegas. We spent quite a bit of good time in the desert and a little bit of highway, and now we've just got that last stretch of freeway down the 15 to get back into the Los Angeles area. And I'm not really sure that we're any closer to deciding which one of these two adventure touring bikes is better. I keep coming back to feeling probably the most comfortable on the Honda, but then there are some really fantastic attributes to the KTM that I just can't let go of. So
Right, I think my gut's telling me the Honda wins this in a squeaker. The one thing about the KTM that I can't really forgive the Honda for is just how solid the KTM feels. Even the bars, the zero flex in the pegs, like the bars feel more solid. Going back from the Honda to the KTM on the freeway when we pulled off and swapped bikes, we had these nasty, like, gusty crosswinds, and we're averaging about 85 miles an hour with everyone else, you know, 300 of our closest friends on the I-15, and they're getting gusty and everything else. And on the Honda, it's got a big windscreen, you're behind it, and it's pretty comfortable.
So the Africa Twin, one thing I am noticing is that it seems to be a little more sensitive to crosswinds and turbulence than the KTM is.
But it just seems like the gust blows it and you get a secondary wiggle from the soft suspension. When you stand up on the Honda, you can actually feel a little bit of flex in the bars or at the triple clamp. You know, you can feel a little flex in the pegs. I was Honda first out of Vegas, and then I hopped on the KTM, and I was loving the Honda, absolutely loving it, not really thinking too much about the flex. But when I got on the KTM, it was just rock solid, and I was like, oh, okay. Now, of course, again, crosswinds and stuff, both of them with the TKC 80 tires, they get a little squirmy, as any motorcycle would in those conditions, but they're still plenty stable. There was nothing scary about it. They just sort of shimmy down the road, but there's no secondary shimmy to the KTM. It's just whatever's natural there, and that's it. So I like that solidity of the KTM. I kind of like the looks of the KTM a lot, but I got to give it to the Africa Twin. The Africa Twin's the bike you don't think about riding, you just ride it.
So we filled up at the range, or just before the shooting range yesterday, and that was about 20 miles back into Vegas. And since Vegas, we were now over to Baker, indicating 144 miles, and we are out of gas. I'm going to spin back around. See here, one nice thing about the Africa Twin, look at this. Just super friendly at parking lot speeds. Like, you can just crawl this thing around, turn it around within its own length, no problem at all. All right, so 144.8, and we're getting close to running empty.
In the KTM, you think about how do I got to apply the brake, how much throttle is it going to give me as I roll the throttle, because you feel like there's a computer between your hand and the motor. There is. And on the Honda, there is also, but you don't feel it unless you're in a high traction control setting.
I think for me, best of both worlds, I would marry the Honda engine and its responsiveness and the way that it feels and the way that it pulls and the way that it sounds, which is awesome.
Like a big XR.
To the KTM's chassis and suspension. And then I think I would have the ideal bike. But we don't necessarily live in an ideal world. And I think it's still going to come down to, like Sean said, a really close race on the scorecard. So in order to find out who really won this shootout, we invite you to check out Motorcycle.com. We'll have the feature up shortly. We'll have the complete scorecard, dyno results, weights and measures, all the stuff that you need to know to make your own choice as to which one of these adventure touring bikes is the one for you. So until next time, Scott Russo, Sean Alexander, we'll catch you down the road.
No, leave, please. Don't come back.
We're filming a porno, you must go away.
That must look really weird.
Because she can't see us. All she sees is a guy with a camera. And we're like, no, get out.